All right, brothers, our course is called Christian Worldview, even though, as you will note, in this particular session, we won't necessarily be focusing merely on Christian worldview. We will be talking about the whole concept of worldview in general. And then in coming weeks, or rather days and weeks and months, we will narrow down to the Christian worldview. And what I want us to do today is to answer some foundational questions on worldview in general. Before we do anything else in regard to that, I would like to draw your attention to the Bible and to Matthew chapter 16. We'll read from verse 5 through to 12. And I'm drawing your attention to that passage because it gives us an idea of what a worldview is. Verse 5 reads, "When the disciples reached the other side, they had forgotten to bring any bread. Jesus said to them, 'Watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees.' And they began discussing it among themselves, saying, 'We brought no bread.' But Jesus, aware of this, said, 'You of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive? Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000, and how many baskets you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000, and how many baskets you gathered? How is it that you fail to understand that I did not speak about bread? Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees.' Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees." And I want to suggest to us here that in speaking about the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees, the Lord Jesus Christ was referring to the worldview of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Which brings me to our material, and what we want to do is just ask questions about worldview, beginning with the question, what is a worldview? What is a worldview? The English word worldview is derived from a German word, Weltanschauung. Weltanschauung. It's a compound word made up of 2 words in particular. The word Welt, which means world, and Anschauung, something like that, which means outlook or view. So the word Weltanschauung was first used by the philosopher Immanuel Kant to describe an individual's sensory perception of the world. By the 1940s, it had become a standard word in Germany. This is what another philosopher says about worldview, a man called Albert Wolters. He says the basic idea of Weltanschauung is that it is a point of view on the world, a perspective on things, a way of looking at the cosmos from a particular vantage point. it therefore tends to carry the connotation of being personal, of being dated and private, limited in validity by its historical conditions. Even when a worldview is collective, that is to say, shared by everyone belonging to a given nation, class, or period, it nonetheless shares in the historical individuality of that particular nation or class of period. Now that's a mouthful, but I hope that as we go along, it will be clear to all of us what Albert Waters had in mind. And then I have a group of three men, Anderson, Clark, and Nogo. This is how they define worldview together. I have made available their book on Christian worldview to you. You must have received it electronically. They say a worldview is the conceptual lens through which we see, understand, and interpret the world and our place in it. And then one of those men, David Nugal, he goes on to say a worldview can more simply be defined as the noetic structure that we use to make sense of the world. And this is the definition I would like you all to try and memorize. And I think it is easy to memorize because it's a simple definition. The noetic structure that we use to make sense of the world. The word noetic from the Greek nous, which means mind. To say noetic structure is to say the structure of the mind. So it is the structure of the mind that we use to make sense of the world. The structure of the mind that we use to make sense of the world. Now, everyone has a mind that is structured in a particular way and through which they interpret the world before them. All of us have a mind that is structured in a particular way. Whenever any of us thinks about anything, from casual thought, like, where did I leave my watch? To a profound question like, who am I? We are operating within this structure, within this structured mind, within this framework. And one way of looking at a worldview is to think of it in terms of a lens. Each of us has a lens in our eyes, and we see whatever we see through that lens. Now, if the lens of your eye is colored blue, you will most likely be seeing a blue world. If it's colored yellow, you will be seeing a yellow world. If it's colored green, you'll be seeing a green world. The shape of your lens, the color of your lens, that is what determines the kind of world you see. So whatever has shaped your lenses, the lenses of your eyes, that is what enables you to see the world as you see it. And every one of us has a worldview. There is no person without a worldview. We all have a lens through which we view the world. And our lenses are different from other people's lenses. There may be situations in which a lot of the ways in which we look at the world could be similar, but there are also many ways in which how we look at our world is very individualized. Everyone has a worldview. Well, let me illustrate how that we all have our worldview by sharing this account of three friends with you. Three friends who went to a nature reserve in the Serengeti National Park. The Serengeti is found in Tanzania and in Kenya. And these friends went there and experienced the majestic beauty and diversity of native African wildlife. They saw zebras, elephants, gazelles, lions, rhinoceros, etc. And each one of them was awestruck by the diversity of the creatures they observed. Now, let me tell you about how each one of them experienced the Serengeti. First, a man called John Luther was among the three. He commented boldly, having looked at all these animals and whatever else he saw in the Serengeti. He says, the Lord God has definitely created an amazing array of creatures that sing his praises and declare his glory to the ends of the earth. Has he not? That's how John Luther responded. He could see God in all that he was seeing and enjoying in the Serengeti. Well, in comes another friend. His name was Charles Dawkins, probably familiar with that name. He immediately responded when he looked at this amazing view and when he heard his friend speak about the glory of God. He says, yes, indeed, an amazing array of creatures. But you err, my friend, in ascribing their existence to a creator. No, these incredible animals are the result of the unguided, purposeless combination of random mutation and natural selection. We too are the product of a natural evolutionary process. Indeed, we are no different from the creatures that we see. But Dawkins could see evolution in whatever he was experiencing out there in the Serengeti. But there was a third person, a lady called Shirley Chopra. She serenely replied, I pray you both would be enlightened to the full reality disclosed by our brothers. She had a pantheistic outlook. She wasn't just seeing animals there, she was seeing beyond that. And she was persuaded the two friends of hers did not have the light to see that these animals are, in fact, something of God, because pantheism does not draw any difference between God and his creation. So we see three different outlooks to the same situation. I wonder what an African would have said if he was there. We will have opportunity to look at the African worldview, God willing, as we go along in these courses this week. Let me give you one more illustration, and it's related to a lady called Josie. She was a Peace Corps worker and nurse at a hospital, a mission hospital in Sierra Leone called Serabu. This is in West Africa, of course. She had just completed teaching a course in microbiology to 10 Sierra Leonean nursing students. All the students had passed their exams. In doing so, they had demonstrated an understanding that viruses, bacteria, and other microscopic organisms cause disease? After class discussed the results of the final exam, one student raised her hand and said, "Miss Josie, I know what you taught us about how white people get sick, but do you know how people really get sick?" Miss Josie responded, "How?" And the student says, "It's the witches. They are invisible and they fly around at night, biting people's backs." Now, clearly, Josie and her nursing students had a different set of assumptions regarding the cause of disease. For Josie, who was an American, microorganisms caused disease. For her students, it was the witches that caused disease. Another way of putting it is, for Josie, disease was caused by physical factors. For the students, disease was caused by spiritual or supernatural factors. Now, each set of assumptions was part of the holder's worldview or belief system. So there was a clear conflict between Josie's worldview or belief system and her students' worldview and belief systems. If they had different outlooks in terms of what causes disease, you can guess they will also have different outlooks as to how to cure those diseases. For Josie, physical factors cause disease, physical solutions must cure the disease. For her students, spiritual factors cause disease, spiritual solutions must bring about the cure. So that's important for us to note. The famous church father, African church father, if I may add, Augustine, Aurelius Augustine, he recognized that a people's dominant worldview inevitably shapes the world they have in view. Let me say that again. A people's dominant worldview inevitably shapes the world they have in view. Brings back to the illustration I gave earlier on. This is something of what Augustine is trying to say. If the lens of your worldview is colored red or blue, the world you will see will look red or blue. Let me see if I can share. Let me see if I can share my screen with you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right.
Yes, Ronald, we can. Yes.
Right. Thank you. So the critical issue then for any follower of Christ is whether or not his worldview is rooted in biblical truth or the surrounding culture and other beliefs. That is the critical issue. And we will be interacting with that as we go along. So the next question we want to pick up is, what does a worldview look like? Now, you will recall that we defined a worldview as the noetic structure we use to make sense of the world. Now, someone has compared a worldview to a spider web. And a spider web is a complex network of threads spun by a spider to catch prey, to protect itself, to facilitate movement. Spiders produce silk threads from their spinnerets, which they then use to construct intricate webs. A typical spider web consists of, and we won't take a long time on this, you can read it up for yourselves, radial threads. These threads radiate from the center of the web, providing structural support. They have what is referred to as spiral threads. These threads spiral outward from the center, creating a sticky surface to capture prey. Frame threads, which form the outer frame of the web, providing additional support. Viscoelastic threads. Some spider webs contain threads with these elastic properties, which help to absorb vibrations. That's just an example of what a thread looks like. If you look at the center, you can see a small circle, and then the circles keep widening, but they all belong together. They all belong together. And I'll be saying something about those threads or circles in a moment. But the threads or circles represent beliefs. They represent beliefs. So if you look at this whole web and each of those circles representing a belief, as seen together, we can say that that is a belief set. That's a belief set. And your belief set is your worldview. The beliefs that represent the first inner circles. If you look at the drawing, you can see in the middle of the web the circles that are concentrated on the center. Let's say you can take 2 or 3 or 4 of those circles. Those circles represent the radial threads, and we are going to borrow from a Christian philosopher, and we'll call them the properly basic beliefs. The properly basic beliefs. So the beliefs at the center of the web are the properly basic beliefs. We can also refer to them as foundational beliefs or core beliefs. They are the bedrock beliefs that need no evidence to support them. And other beliefs normally rest on those beliefs. So I want us to take a moment to think together upon those beliefs, properly basic beliefs. Now, properly basic beliefs are defined as self-evident or incorrigible beliefs. They are evident to the senses. Nobody needs to tell you that they are there. They are self-evident. They are the kind of beliefs you don't have to prove and you don't have to justify because they are self-evident. What do they look like? Well, according to Alvin Plantinga, this is the Christian philosopher we borrowed the idea of the properly basic beliefs from. What do they look like? What do they sound like? Well, first of all, when you say, I see a tree, your own eyes can see a tree. You can perceive a tree. You don't have to be told that that is a tree, unless you're an infant. We'll talk about that in a moment. You don't have to be told. You can see it. Your eyes can tell you. Or if you say, I'm in pain, what you're saying is that you're feeling pain. A doctor doesn't have to tell you that you're feeling pain. You tell the doctor that you are feeling pain. You know that experience of pain introspectively. Or, I had breakfast this morning. It's now about 4:30 East African or Zambian time, 4:30. I had breakfast in the morning. So I know that through my memory. In a sense, no one needs to tell me that I had breakfast. My memory tells me. Another example is the sense that God exists. The sense that God exists. It's self-evident. I know that atheists want to tell us otherwise, but this is a sense that the creator of man has put in all men. God exists. And to use the language of Calvin, Latin language, he says, we know this through the sensus divinitatis, which is an innate sense of God. All of us have this innate sense of God. Every human being is born with the knowledge that God exists and that we are accountable to him. That's according to John Calvin. Belief in God is produced by our sensus divinitatis in the right conditions, which are everywhere. Therefore, belief in God is a properly basic belief, self-evident. I've also included human experience as being self-evident, known as the sensus humanitas, an innate sense of human commonality. The spelling there is not right. Human commonalities. Things that make us human. All humans have this sense within themselves, a desire for meaning. Ubuntu, I will teach you something. You are American friends. Ubuntu, at least in this side of Africa, it means being humane. Being humane. Human beings are also humane. They have a desire to help each other, to love each other, to do good to each other. This is just something you grow to experience, discover that this is what you want. This is what human beings want. But human beings also sense their own limitations. The fact that they are not perfect, the fact that they do wrong, and they have a sense of what is right and what is wrong within themselves. This is self-evident, and therefore a properly basic belief. What are some characteristics of properly basic beliefs? First of all, they are held with the strongest possible conviction. If you look at that drawing we had of a spider web, and you go to the center of the web and to those circles that are at the center, those circles are positioned where they are because they represent the strongest possible convictions. Those circles that are toward the circumference are part of the web, but they don't hold strongly to the belief set. So the properly basic beliefs are held with the strongest possible conviction. They enjoy the greatest degree of ingression in the system, and they have the highest kind of control over everything else in the noetic structure. Now, a lot of us don't often realize that we even have a worldview. It is second nature to you. It's a part of you. It's like looking through your eye lens. You see through your lens, but you don't see your lens. And yet your lens is what makes it possible for you to see. We see through our worldviews, even though more often than not, we are not even aware that we have a worldview. John Frame calls these beliefs the ultimate presuppositions. They take precedence over other beliefs and serve as a criterion for other beliefs. No other beliefs take precedent over them. That is why they are properly basic. Another characteristic, they are what we think with and ultimately what we live by. They are what we think with. You're not conscious that you are thinking with your worldview, but you are. They are the set of things on which all our thinking and all our doing turn. They are the means by which we answer questions like, why is there anything at all? How can we know for sure? What are we here for? Why have things gone so badly wrong? Is there any hope of fixing them? What should I do with my life? Where will it end? We are asking all of these questions. We are thinking these questions, and we are searching for answers to these questions. We think with our worldview, we answer with our worldview. The properly basic beliefs are also the reason why we do what we do. They are the reason why we do what we do. They explain our way of looking at life, our interpretation of the universe, our orientation to reality, why we make culture the way we do it. If you have a properly basic belief like God exists, which seriously every human being has, you will be able to answer a lot of questions like, who am I? Why am I here? How am I expected to live? Where am I going? God will give you the answers to those questions. If you are an evolutionist, the answers you give will be very different from what someone who has God's existence as their properly basic belief. Okay, we also have derived beliefs. If we go back to that web, the spider web, we did not just see the circles close to the center of the web, but also the circles that go toward the circumference of the web. So those other circles can be referred to as derived beliefs. Derived beliefs. In epistemology, derived beliefs are beliefs that are inferred or deduced from other beliefs. In this case, according to some philosophers such as Alvin Plantinga, derived beliefs can indeed come from properly basic beliefs. The properly basic beliefs have those self-evident beliefs, and from those self-evident beliefs, we derive the secondary or supportive beliefs, as they are sometimes called. Now, how are derived beliefs drawn from properly basic beliefs? There is a clear relationship between your properly basic beliefs and your derived beliefs. How are the derived beliefs drawn from the properly basic beliefs? Well, it is done through inference, deduction, and abduction. Let's work through those words very quickly. First of all, they are derived by inference. Derived beliefs can be inferred from properly basic beliefs through logical reasoning. For example, if I have a properly basic belief that I exist, which is true, All human beings know that, self-evident. But if my proper basic belief is that I exist, I can infer from the derived belief that I am a thinking being. If I exist, well, I must be thinking. So I exist is the proper basic belief. I am a thinking being is the derived belief. And then derived beliefs can be deduced from proper basic beliefs using deductive reasoning. We deduce from premises. The famous syllogism, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. All men are mortal. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Those are premises. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. That's a conclusion that is deduced from those two premises. So if I have a properly basic belief that all men or all humans are mortal, I can deduce the derived belief that Socrates is mortal. All humans are mortal is self-evident. If that is self-evident and Socrates is human, it must of necessity follow that Socrates is mortal. Abduction, derived beliefs can also be formed through abductive reasoning, which involves making an educated guess or hypothesis based on properly basic beliefs. For example, if I have a properly basic belief that I see smoke, and if you have been in California in the recent past, you would have seen smoke. I see smoke. Now, I can abductively infer the derived belief that there is a fire nearby. If there is smoke, I can guess that there must be a fire nearby. So you can see the relationship there between properly basic beliefs and derived beliefs. Just some more examples. Properly basic belief, I am bad. Someone can sense that for themselves. Nobody needs to tell them. A derived belief would be, I can't do anything right. I am bad, therefore I can't do anything right. That is the derived belief. I am totally depraved. That would be your properly basic belief. Well, therefore, I can't do anything that would perfectly please God. That would be your derived belief. Properly basic belief, I am smart. Derived belief, I will not succeed if I try. Rather, I will succeed if I try. Properly basic belief, I am unlovable. Derived belief, nobody will ever appreciate me. Properly basic belief, people are untrustworthy. Derived belief, people will take advantage and hurt me if they have a chance. So there's a very clear relationship between those two beliefs. So what we are saying is the derived belief is ultimately grounded in the properly basic belief, from which it is inferred, deduced, or abducted. Okay, let's go on, and we have to run. What are the philosophical components of a worldview? Now, at this stage, we are not thinking necessarily upon Christian worldview. We'll come to that at the right time, just laying some general principles around the whole idea of a worldview. What are the components, the philosophical components? In other words, what makes up our basic beliefs? Any worldview answers basic questions in the realms of metaphysics, epistemology, axiology, and eschatology. So a lot of questions are covered in those philosophical categories. And we'll just do a run. When we zero in on Christian worldview, we are going to study these things in a bit of detail. At this moment, I'm just introducing the concepts. So we'll begin with metaphysics. Metaphysics. What is metaphysics? The word metaphysics is made up of two words, meta, that's a Greek word, preposition, which can mean above or beyond, physica, which means nature. We derive the word physics from there. So metaphysics refers to the study of what is beyond or outside of human sense perception. Beyond or outside of human sense perception. Things you are studying are there, but you cannot perceive them through your own five senses. They are real, but you may not be able to perceive them through your five senses. And the study that gives attention to that is referred to as metaphysics. Or we can simply say metaphysics is the study of reality, or the study of the nature, structure, and origin of what exists. Metaphysics has some sub-components: cosmogony, ontology, cosmology. Cosmogony, ontology, and cosmology. Cosmogony deals with how the universe came into being. It is about trying to understand or study the origin of what exists, the origin of reality. That's cosmogony. Ontology deals with the nature of existence, the nature of what kind of things exist, the nature of reality, the nature of being. So that being has been brought about, but what is that being? What is the nature of that being, which may have been brought about and in some cases may not have been brought about? When we study God himself, he is uncreated reality. And ontology studies that. Cosmology deals with the nature and structure of what exists. How does the universe work? That is covered under this metaphysical category. We also have epistemology. Epistemology. Worldview interacts with epistemology. It is defined in terms of epistemology. Epistemology is the study of the nature, ground, and limits of knowledge. Sometimes it is referred to as the theory of knowledge. It attempts to answer questions such as, what does it mean to know something? How can we know what we know? Do we know things independent of experience? Or do we know things based upon experience? If things are independent of experience, that knowledge is referred to in Latin as a priori knowledge. They are based upon experience, a posteriori knowledge. And whatever we come to know, how do we know that what we know is true? All of those are important epistemological questions, and every worldview has a way of explaining that. And then there is axiology. Axiology, the study of the nature, types, and criteria of value. and of value judgments, especially in ethics as well as in aesthetics. So axiology will involve a study of values. And they can be religious values, they can be aesthetic values, they can be moral values. Axiology answers questions such as, what ought I to do? How do I determine what I ought to do? How do I know what is right and what is wrong? What is valuable? And so on and so forth. We live in a world where we must answer such questions. And our worldviews, depending on what they are, will provide the answers. And then, of course, there is eschatology, the study of the doctrine of the last things, and very much associated with Western theology, what I have here, referring to the Christian beliefs about death and the end of history, the intermediate state, the resurrection, the last judgment, the eternal state of things in heaven or hell, the problem of theodicy. Answers to such questions are posed by our worldviews. Solutions to these questions are provided by our worldviews. How does a worldview form? How does a worldview form? Very important question. I have some negative answers and a positive answer. The negatives are, it doesn't begin by merely sitting in a classroom, listening to a lecture on worldview. There are people who think, if I can attend that class on Christian worldview, I will come out thinking Christianly. Now, sitting in a classroom, a worldview classroom, will certainly help to help set off your thinking, possibly thinking that will lead to the formation of a worldview. But it doesn't begin by merely sitting in a classroom. There are many people who sit through a Christian worldview class who don't come out thinking Christianly. Secondly, it is not inborn. It is not inborn. Now, although it is true to say that every human being possesses a worldview, however, we are not born with it. It doesn't begin with a set of beliefs or attitudes or values genetically ingrained in us. How does it form? James Sire, I have also provided an electronic copy of his book. He says a worldview begins with a word picture. It's important to begin there. When we are born, the first thing we see is a word picture. I actually recall my son, my oldest son, coming into this world. I was there, received him, and he was a very big baby. When the nurses cleaned him up and so on, they put him in my arms, and his eyes were wide open. He was looking all over the room as if trying to decide for himself, what is this? He was seeing something, even though he could not explain himself at that stage. We see a world picture when we come into this world, and initially we cannot make sense of it because we are too young. But as time rolls on and we are becoming more and more conscious of ourselves and our surroundings, we begin to ask questions about it. We want to understand what it is, how it came about, what our place in it is, what our lives mean. Let me quote James Sire. He wrote in his book, The Universe Next Door, the first assumption everyone makes before he even begins to think at all is that something exists. That, of course, is the world picture. In other words, all worldviews assume that something is there rather than that nothing is there. The apprehension that something is there is the beginning of conscious life. From this pre-theoretical world picture arises one's life world. That life world becomes personalized and relates in the conscious activity of the person. This, in time, gives rise to a clearly developed worldview. Now, so you've seen the world picture. You need to make sense of it. Basically, you make sense of this world picture with the help of what we refer to as shaping influences. Shaping influences. What are the influences that unite to give shape to this world picture? Now, in your notes, you will read quite a bit about this. We won't have time to work through that, but we will have time just to barely mention some shaping influences we are exposed to, which contribute to bringing about the lens through which we view the world. Family background. When you first come into the world, you are received into a family, and your parents are your first influencers. They actually explain that world picture to you. That is a roof. That is a tree. Those are human beings, and so on and so forth. And you begin to form the picture. That is wrong. That is right. This is how you do this, and this is how you do the other. Family. And then friends. Friends quickly come into your life. They come with their own worldviews into your life, and they have some influence on you. Life experience. And it will be different kinds of experiences. There are people who are born in war situations, others who are born in very, very poor circumstances, and still others in different circumstances. Whatever circumstance you come into life with, they contribute to shaping your life, your outlook to life. Popular influences. They may come through the social media. They may come through celebrities, etc. Economic circumstances. I've referred to that. Cultural context. There's such a thing as a national culture. There is such a thing as individual culture, such a thing as tribal culture. And we are each born in different kinds of cultural contexts. We may all share a natural cultural context, but we may be distinguished by our own peculiar tribal or other context, which makes our worldview that much more nuanced. Educational pedigree, national heritage, linguistic community. There are certain ideas that are communicated through our languages, and some ideas can only be communicated through your language, your particular language, and that contributes to your outlook. Physiological characteristics. Some people are very easily influenced, others are not. How God shaped you when He brought you into this world will also define how your worldview will turn out. Self, psychological makeup, historical situation, all of these things combine to shape our world views. Question number 5. What is the relationship between science and worldview? Now, in a sense, science could be a shaping influence, but more often than not, it is our worldview that shapes science. Worldview provides the presuppositions that enable us to practice science in a particular way. Sometimes scientists say, the science will produce the truth. It is almost as if everyone goes to the science with a blank slate, so to say. They are thinking nothing except what they discover out of the science. But the truth is that many scientists begin with presuppositions. And science can reveal a predisposition toward a belief before an investigation is done. Evolutionistic science always begins with a presupposition. Christian-based science always begins with a presupposition. And Christian-based science begins with the presupposition that God exists. And he is the one who created all that is. And we are going into the world to interact with what God created. The science does not produce what we study. God produces that. We study what God has produced, what he has created. So science is a tool that helps us to understand what God has created. It doesn't create. So our worldview does influence how we do science. Question number 6, how does a worldview function in reality? So you started out with a worldview picture, and through your interaction with shaping influences, various shaping influences, your worldview is actually made. Now that you have a worldview, how does that worldview function? Now, it doesn't function in a single direction. That is to say, our worldview influences our outlook on reality, but it is also true to say that sometimes we have to experience something for our worldview to be developed in some direction. I start out with a worldview. There are various influences that have combined to make my worldview. I'm an African. And then I moved to the Western world, to America. And I experienced life differently. So I might have had a particular outlook, but having gone to another place, another culture, that outlook may completely change. And my worldview may be directed, in some other way. So I may have my worldview, and my worldview can shape all that I do, but an experience in a different place can also shape the direction of my worldview. So there is an interaction between my outlook and my experience. My outlook will lead me this way, but sometimes I start with experience. Experience changes the way I view life, and it begins to head in a totally different direction. What is the value of a worldview? Why talk about worldview? There's a five-fold answer we could give. I'm sure there are more answers we could give, but the following are important. First, a worldview unifies perspective. Philosophy always begins with a search for one thing that unifies everything else. And a worldview, which is rooted in philosophy, as we have seen, always asks the question, how do all things hold together? Perhaps head in one direction. What makes this world make sense for me? So it unifies perspective. Secondly, it gives guidance to thought. The world is filled with things to think about. The worldview guides us about how we must think about all these things. Thirdly, a worldview gives guidance to action, helps us make decisions about life in general. Four, it's always teleological. In other words, it answers the question, what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of life? And then it induces intellectual assent. In other words, it helps in the evaluation of truth claims. It helps in the evaluation of truth claims. I have a worldview. I'm exposed to some claim, some truth claim. How do I decide whether that claim is right or wrong? How do I decide whether it is helpful? Well, I can bring my worldview to bear on that claim in order to make that decision. The final question for this session, and we are not yet studying Christian worldview, but we will be studying Christian worldview. We'll be evaluating everything else that we learn in the light of a Christian worldview. Now, if our definition of a worldview was that it's the noetic structure Christians use to make sense of the world, we can define a Christian worldview as the noetic structure Christians use to make sense of the world. The noetic structure we use to make sense of the world is how we define worldview in general. But a Christian worldview is particularized, isn't it? It's the noetic structure Christians use to make sense of the world. It follows that noetic structure, that structure of the mind has been shaped by Christian influences. And when we discuss Christian worldview, we will talk about those influences. So a combination of those influences helps to form this structure of the mind, and we then use that structure to make sense of the world. We can also say a Christian worldview is a comprehensive and integrated perspective on life, reality, and human experience. Based on the teachings of the Bible, we spoke about shaping influences. Here is an important shaping influence for a Christian worldview, based on the teachings of the Bible and the person of Jesus Christ. After all, it's a Christian worldview. It's Christian because of Christ. So it is the influence of his person, of his works, that helps to shape this outlook. And if you have had something of that influence, well, these are the implications of having a Christian worldview. Again, here I just mentioned these things in passing. We will unpack many of these as we go on. But we'll end with this. Christianity informs and shapes all areas of life. And I mean all areas of life. It's possible to claim to be a Christian. It's possible to claim to have been through a Christian school, but never have been influenced to think about the whole of life through these Christian lenses or categories. Christianity informs and shapes all areas of life, including relationships, work, and culture. When you are a Christian, you don't say, this is my Christianity and this is my culture. you say, this is my culture, which has come under Christian influence. Maybe African culture, but it's an African culture that is lived out through your Christian lenses and outlook. The Bible is the ultimate source of truth and guidance. The ultimate. Christianity values both faith and reason, seeing them as complementary rather than contradictory. When we become Christians, we don't stop reasoning. We become better thinkers. And our thinking is bathed in the principles of the Bible. Christians are called to serve and to share the gospel with others. The Christian worldview provides a cohesive and meaningful framework for understanding the world, understanding our place in it, and understanding our relationship with God.